The night of the clowns. It was a Friday night, and I had the house to myself. My parents had left for the weekend to visit family, leaving me in charge of the place. At 21 years old, being alone in the house wasn't a big deal for me. I was used to it. Besides, the freedom was nice. I had plans to binge-watch some shows, order pizza, and just enjoy a quiet night in. The house was an older one, a bit creaky in places, but overall it had a comfortable, familiar vibe. Situated in a quiet suburban neighborhood, I never worried much about safety. The neighbors were close enough to notice anything suspicious, and it wasn't exactly the kind of place where trouble happened. Or so I thought. It was around 9 p.m, and the night had settled in with a heavy darkness. The wind outside was calm, and the streets were quiet. After finishing up the latest episode of my favorite series, I decided it was time to grab a late-night snack. I headed into the kitchen, flicking on the lights. As I rifled through the pantry, trying to decide between chips and microwave popcorn, something caught my eye through the window. I froze, my hand hovering over a bag of chips. There was a figure standing on the lawn. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure was distant, standing near the edge of the driveway, right by the sidewalk. It was hard to make out details, but whoever it was seemed to be wearing a weird outfit, brightly colored, oversized, almost like a clown. A chill crept down my spine. Clowns? At this time of night? I squinted, hoping it was just some trick of the light, or maybe a neighbor's Halloween decoration that had blown over. But no, the figure moved. Slowly, it took a step forward, closer to my house. The streetlight flickered, illuminating its face. It was a clown. Bright red hair, painted face, a huge, exaggerated grin stretching from ear to ear. And it was looking right at me. "What the hell?" I muttered under my breath, backing away from the window. My pulse quickened. This had to be a prank, right? Kids from the neighborhood, messing around or filming some viral video. But why would they choose my house? I shook my head, trying to dismiss the creeping unease. Before I could think further, a loud knock echoed through the house. It wasn't from the front door, though. It came from the back, right where the kitchen door was. I jumped, my heart pounding. Slowly, I turned toward the kitchen door. Through the small window on the door, I could see another figure, another clown. This one had a different outfit, blue polka dots, but the same disturbing grin painted on its face. I stepped back, feeling a cold sweat break out on my forehead. "Is this some kind of joke?" I called out, my voice shaking. No answer. I backed up even more, moving out of the kitchen into the hallway. My mind raced. What should I do? Should I confront them? Call the cops? It still didn't feel serious enough for that, but I didn't want to take any chances. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed 911 just in case. As I waited for the call to connect, I heard movement outside, footsteps shuffling. I crept toward the front door and peeked through the peephole. A third clown. This one stood directly on the porch, staring right at the front door. It was dressed in green, with oversized shoes and a huge red nose. Its grin seemed wider, more sinister. It raised a hand and knocked again, louder this time. My stomach turned. The phone rang in my ear, but no one had picked up yet. What was taking so long? The front door rattled, and I realized with horror that the clown was trying the doorknob. "They're trying to get in," I whispered to myself. My throat felt tight, and I backed away from the door, clutching the phone like a lifeline. Just then, the 911 operator picked up. "911, what's your emergency?" the voice on the other end asked. There are people outside my house, I stammered. 3 of them, dressed as clowns. They're trying to get in. Stay calm, sir, the operator said, though I could tell they were taking me seriously now. Can you lock the doors? They're already locked, I said, my voice shaking. But they're knocking, trying the doorknob. Stay inside. Officers are on their way, the operator assured me. Is there any way you can get to a safe part of the house? I looked around, heart racing. I'm already in the hallway. I think I'm okay here. The knocking at the front door continued, harder and faster now, as if the clown outside was getting impatient. I flinched every time the sound echoed through the house. Then I heard something else, footsteps, from upstairs. My blood ran cold. I hadn't been upstairs in hours, and I knew I was the only one home. But there it was. The unmistakable sound of slow, deliberate footsteps moving across the floorboards above me. There's someone in the house, I whispered into the phone, my voice barely audible. What do you mean? The operator asked, her tone becoming more urgent. I hear footsteps upstairs. I think one of them is inside. The operator was silent for a moment, and then she spoke again, her voice firm. Stay where you are. Officers are almost there. Don't move unless you're in immediate danger. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. My grip on the phone tightened. The footsteps upstairs grew louder, moving from one end of the house to the other. I felt like I was being watched, even though I couldn't see anything. Suddenly, the pounding at the front door stopped. The house was silent again, except for the footsteps above. Then I heard the back door rattling, as if someone was trying to break in from there too. I forced myself to stay still, fighting the urge to run. If one of them was inside, how had they gotten in? And how many of them were there? My mind raced with questions, but there was no time for answers. I just needed to hold on until the police arrived. A loud crash came from upstairs, followed by the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. My heart pounded in my chest. What were they doing up there? I didn't dare move to check. Instead, I stayed crouched in the hallway, waiting for any sign of help. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. The clowns outside seemed to notice too, because the pounding stopped altogether. The dragging sound from upstairs ceased as well. I could hear the police cars pulling up outside, and relief washed over me. The sound of car doors slamming shut was followed by the officers shouting orders. I cautiously made my way to the front window and peeked through the curtain. The clowns were no longer at the door, but I could see 2 of them running down the street, trying to escape. The officers were already in pursuit, yelling for them to stop. I didn't see the 3rd one, the one that had been inside the house, but I didn't care. The police were here. I was safe. I opened the front door cautiously and stepped out onto the porch just as 2 officers approached. Are you okay? One of them asked, his hand resting on his holstered gun. I think so, I replied, my voice still shaky. There were 3 of them. One might still be inside. The officer nodded and motioned for his partner to check the house. A few minutes later, they confirmed the house was clear. They hadn't found anyone upstairs, but they did find a window that had been forced open. They probably used the window to get in, one of the officers explained. We've got the other 2 in custody. It looks like it was just some idiots pulling a prank. I nodded, though the adrenaline still coursed through me. A prank? That's all this was. The officer gave me a reassuring smile. You did the right thing by calling us. We'll make sure these guys don't bother anyone else." As they led the two handcuffed clowns to the police cars, I watched in disbelief. The terror I had felt was still fresh in my mind. But now that it was over, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The third clown, the one who had been inside, was never caught. But I'd never forget the sound of those footsteps above me. The wail at night. One cold winter evening when I was 14, my parents had gone out for a dinner party, leaving me home alone for the first time. I wasn't too worried. Our house was surrounded by forest, but I'd grown up there, and the woods had always felt like a part of home, familiar, comforting. I planned to watch some TV and go to bed early. Around midnight, I was deep asleep when something woke me. At first, it was just a faint noise, so soft I thought it might have been a dream. But then it grew louder, a long, high-pitched wail, like nothing I had ever heard before. My heart started racing, and I sat up, straining to listen. The sound echoed through the trees outside, cutting through the stillness of the night. I had heard all kinds of animals in the woods: coyotes, owls, even the occasional fox scream. But this was different. It was sharper, more piercing, and it seemed to crawl under my skin, filling me with a sense of dread. I lay still, clutching the blanket, trying to convince myself it was just some animal, nothing to be afraid of. Then it happened again. But this time, the sound wasn't coming from the woods. It was coming from the other side of the house. A chill ran down my spine. How could something move that fast without me hearing footsteps, branches snapping, or leaves rustling? The noise was closer now, almost as if it was circling the house. My pulse quickened as my brain raced through all the terrifying possibilities. Was it some kind of wild animal? Or was it something else entirely? Trying to shake off the panic creeping in, I crept out of bed and tiptoed to the window. The trees stood still in the moonlight, casting long shadows across the snow-covered ground. But there was no movement, no sign of anything. I waited, breathless, for the sound to come again. And then I heard it. Not a wail this time, but a soft scratching, like claws against glass. My blood froze. The sound was coming from the window right behind me. Slowly, I turned around, half expecting to see something hideous pressed against the glass. But there was nothing. Just the empty window and the pale moonlight filtering through. I backed away, grabbing my phone and huddling in the corner of my room. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to call my parents, but I knew they wouldn't be able to come back right away. So I sat there, listening to the scratching, which now seemed to move from window to window, as if something was trying to find a way inside. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time felt warped in that moment, stretched thin by the terror that had taken root in me. Eventually, the scratching stopped, but the house was still filled with an oppressive silence, like the quiet before a storm. I barely slept that night, jumping at every creak of the house and every gust of wind. The next morning, I cautiously went outside to check the windows. There were no marks, no signs that anything had been there at all. It was as if the night had played some cruel trick on me. Later, I looked up recordings of animal sounds, trying to figure out what I had heard. I went through dozens of clips: foxes, owls, raccoons, but nothing matched the eerie, high-pitched wail that had haunted me the night before. I never heard that sound again, but to this day, I can't explain what it was. All I know is that I wasn't alone that night, and whatever was out there didn't belong in our world. the figures in the fog. It had been a long week at work, and I was more than ready for a quiet weekend at home. My place was small but cozy, nestled at the edge of town in an older neighborhood. Most of the homes nearby were vacant, the owners either having moved or never really settled in, leaving the street eerily quiet most nights. That evening, a dense fog had rolled in, blanketing the area in a thick white mist. I watched it creep in through the window as I sat on the couch, feeling oddly comforted by the isolation. It gave the world outside an almost dreamlike quality, making my little house feel like the only place that existed. After making myself some tea, I curled up with a blanket, planning to binge-watch some shows. The only sound in the room was the soft hum of the TV, and I found myself sinking deeper into the cushions, my body finally relaxing. Then came the knock. It was faint at first, almost like a tapping, but it was unmistakable. I paused the show, straining to hear over the muffled silence of the fog. Another knock followed, louder this time. My heartbeat quickened. I wasn't expecting anyone. I lived alone, and my friends knew better than to show up unannounced, especially at this hour. I glanced at the clock. It was 11:43 p.m. My stomach tightened with unease. Slowly, I stood up, my tea now forgotten on the table. I hesitated, listening. The knock came again, more insistent. I crept toward the front door, each step feeling heavier than the last. My house had no peephole, so I had to rely on the side window to see who was at the door. But as I peered out through the sheer curtain, all I saw was the thick wall of fog. The streetlights were mere smudges of light in the distance, and the world outside seemed completely empty. "Who is it?" I called out, trying to keep the fear from creeping into my voice. No answer. Just the sound of silence pressing in from all sides. The fog seemed to absorb everything: sound, movement, even time itself. I waited for a few moments, my pulse hammering in my ears. But no further knocks came. Maybe it had been nothing. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me after a stressful week. I was about to turn away when the knock came again. This time, it was from the window. I jumped back, my breath catching in my throat. The window rattled slightly, as though someone had tapped on it from the outside. But as I looked, I saw nothing. No shadow, no figure. Just the fog swirling against the glass. My hands were shaking now. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table, my thumb hovering over the emergency dial. But I hesitated. What was I supposed to say? That someone was knocking on my door and windows, but didn't exist. Taking a deep breath, I approached the front window again, this time pulling the curtain aside to get a clearer look. My heart nearly stopped. Standing just beyond the porch, barely visible through the fog, were two figures. They were tall and thin, draped in what looked like long black coats that hung loosely from their frames. Their faces were obscured by the shadows, but I could tell they were facing the house, facing me. One of them stood perfectly still, while the other was closer, one arm raised as though it had been the one tapping on the window. Panic surged through me. I stumbled back from the window, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. I quickly dialed 911, pressing the phone to my ear as I watched the figures through the curtain. 911, what's your emergency? The operator asked calmly. There are two people outside my house, I whispered, my voice trembling. They're standing in the fog, knocking on my windows. The operator asked me for my address and assured me that officers were being dispatched to my location. She told me to stay inside, lock the doors, and wait for help. But as I watched, something even more unsettling happened. The figures didn't move. They didn't approach the door or window again. Instead, they just stood there, completely still, as though waiting for something. "Stay calm," the operator said, sensing my growing fear. "The police are on their way." I locked the front door, my eyes darting between the window and the door, my heart racing. I tried to think rationally. Maybe it was just a prank. Maybe they were just messing with me. But there was something deeply unsettling about their stillness, their silence. Minutes dragged on, feeling like hours. The figures remained in place, standing like statues in the fog. I could hear my own shallow breathing, my hands shaking as I clung to the phone. Suddenly, one of the figures moved. The taller one turned slowly, its head tilting to the side as though it had finally noticed me watching. The gesture was almost too deliberate, too calculated. And then, without warning, it started walking toward the house. My heart stopped. I bolted to the back door, locking it and checking all the windows, trying to secure every possible entrance. The shorter figure was still standing in the same spot, but the taller one, it was at the front door now. I could hear it again, the knock, loud and sharp, echoing through the house. I was shaking uncontrollably, crouching behind the couch with the phone still in my hand. "Please," I whispered into the phone. "They're at the door." The operator's voice was calm but firm. "Officers are almost there. Stay where you are. Don't open the door." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to steady my breathing. The knocking stopped suddenly, and for a brief moment there was silence, and then the sound of footsteps. They were moving around the house now, slow and deliberate. I heard them at the back door, tapping lightly on the glass. I clenched my teeth, forcing myself not to scream, not to give away my location. The tapping moved to the side window, then the back again, circling me like predators. Suddenly, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance, growing closer. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. The footsteps outside stopped abruptly. I crept to the window once more and looked outside. The figures were gone. Just like that, vanished into the fog. There was no sign of them anywhere. 2 police cars pulled up outside, their lights flashing, cutting through the thick mist. The officers got out, approaching the house cautiously. I unlocked the door and let them in, my whole body trembling. "They were here," I stammered, pointing to the spot where the figures had been. "They were knocking on the doors and windows." The officers searched the entire property, but they found nothing. No footprints, no sign that anyone had been there. It was as if the fog had swallowed them whole. "You're safe now," one of the officers said, trying to reassure me. "We'll patrol the area tonight, just in case." But even as they left, even as the fog slowly began to lift, I knew deep down that something was wrong. The figures had disappeared, but the memory of their silent, haunting presence lingered. And as I locked the door behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still out there, somewhere in the fog. The moth at my window. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend. My parents had gone away for a quick getaway to celebrate their anniversary, and I was left to house sit for the first time. At 22, this wasn't a big deal. I had done plenty of things alone, driven cross-country for a music festival, flown internationally to study abroad. But staying alone in my childhood home, for some reason, felt like a rite of passage. I spent most of the day lounging around, catching up on a TV series I had neglected for weeks. It was a calm Saturday, almost eerily still. There wasn't much noise coming from outside, no cars driving by, no neighbors out walking their dogs. It was as if the world had hit the pause button and I was the only one left in this quiet suburban bubble. At first, I didn't think much of the silence. Our neighborhood had always been quiet, and it was something I usually appreciated. But as evening settled in, and shadows began creeping across the walls, the stillness became unsettling. By 7 p.m., the sky had turned a bruised purple, with clouds gathering in the distance. I ordered pizza, tossed my phone on the couch, and pulled a blanket over myself. The wind outside picked up, a low, constant howl that I barely noticed as I scrolled mindlessly through my social media feed. The delivery guy arrived just as the wind had started to whip the tree branches against the side of the house. I tipped him generously, and as I took the box into the living room, I felt a sudden prick of unease. It was irrational, I told myself. It was just the weather. But still, the house felt colder, darker, like something was creeping into its edges. I brushed it off and settled down with my pizza, turning up the volume on the TV to drown out the noise from the storm. The lights flickered for a second, just enough to make me glance toward the window. That's when I saw it. A shadow darting across the backyard, too fast for me to make out what it was. I leaned closer to the window, but the sky outside was completely dark now, only broken up by occasional flashes of lightning. I took a deep breath. It was nothing, just a bird or something blown by the wind. I turned back to the TV, but my unease was growing by the second. The feeling that I wasn't alone in the house was creeping in, like something watching me from just outside the walls. And then the power went out. Just like that, the room plunged into darkness. My TV clicked off, and the overhead light vanished, leaving me in complete, suffocating blackness. I could hear the wind howling louder now, as if it were pressing against the windows. "Great," I muttered to myself, fishing around for my phone. My fingers trembled as I switched on the flashlight. A dim cone of light cut through the dark, casting strange, distorted shadows against the walls. I grabbed a few candles from the kitchen drawer, my heart beating faster than it should have. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. The wind outside seemed to pick up speed, rattling the windows violently. I moved toward the bay window to glance outside, and that's when I saw it. Something large, much larger than any bird, swooped across the backyard. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The thing disappeared into the night, swallowed by the dark. But I had seen enough to know it wasn't a bird. It had wings, huge, leathery wings, and a shape that was almost human. I stood there staring out into the dark yard, my mind scrambling for some kind of explanation. There was none. It was too big, too unnatural. A trick of the storm, I tried to tell myself, but deep down I knew better. As I backed away from the window, I heard it. A faint tapping sound. At first, I thought it was the wind. But then it grew louder, more deliberate. It was coming from the front window. I inched closer, my stomach twisting with dread. I held up my phone's light and moved toward the window, my heart thundering in my chest. I peeked through the curtains and felt my blood run cold. A pair of glowing red eyes stared back at me. I stumbled backward, dropping my phone in the process. The room was plunged into darkness again, and I could feel my heart hammering in my ears. Those eyes, they were still there, watching me through the window. I scrambled for my phone and managed to get the light back on, casting it toward the window. The thing outside moved closer, its pale face coming into focus. It had a twisted, human-like head, but its eyes were huge and red, and its mouth was twisted into a grotesque smile. It had wings, massive, bat-like wings that flapped softly in the storm. The creature scratched at the glass with long, talon-like fingers, testing it. I backed away, my whole body trembling. It was trying to get in. Without thinking, I turned and ran down the hallway, slamming the bedroom door behind me. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely get the lock to click into place. For a few minutes, there was silence. No scratching, no tapping, just the wind howling outside. I tried to calm my breathing, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Then I heard it again. The tapping. But this time it was coming from the bedroom window. My stomach lurched. I hadn't thought about the fact that the creature could fly. It could be anywhere, hovering just outside. My legs felt like they were made of lead as I turned slowly toward the window, where the tapping had become more insistent. I didn't want to look, but I had to. There, silhouetted against the night sky, was the creature again, its wings flapping slowly as it hovered just outside the glass. Its eyes, those horrible red eyes, locked onto mine, and it grinned at me. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. I grabbed the doorknob, flung the bedroom door open, and bolted down the stairs toward the front door. I was shaking so badly I could barely get the locks undone. But finally, I flung the door open and stumbled outside. The wind hit me like a wall, but I didn't care. I needed to get away from that thing. I sprinted toward the car, yanking the door open and diving inside. My hands fumbled with the keys, my whole body shaking as I jammed them into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I threw the car into reverse, my heart slamming against my ribs. As I backed out of the driveway, I glanced toward the house. The creature was standing on the roof, its wings spread wide, watching me as I sped away. I didn't stop driving until I was miles away from the house, pulling into a 24-hour gas station and parking under the bright lights. My hands were still shaking as I tried to process what had just happened. I had no explanation for what I saw. I didn't know if anyone would believe me if I told them. But one thing was clear. Whatever that thing was, it had been waiting for me, and it wasn't done. The shadow at the window. It was a Saturday night, and my parents had gone to an old friend's party, leaving me home alone. At 16, I relished the idea of freedom, planning a night of snacks, Netflix, and maybe a long call with my best friend Lily. I waved my parents off, assuring my mum I'd be fine, and settled into the living room with popcorn, enjoying the quiet of the house. As the night wore on, though, that quiet started to feel heavy, like something lurking in the shadows. It was around 11 p.m. when I first felt it. A strange sense of unease. The house creaked louder than usual. The ticking of the clock seemed amplified. And as I passed the front window on my way to the kitchen, I saw something that sent a chill down my spine. A figure, a man, standing just beyond the driveway, watching the house from the shadows of the oak tree. I blinked, and he was gone. I shook it off, convincing myself I'd imagined it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Back on the couch, I tried to focus on my movie, but every little sound made me jump. The unease only grew when, around 11:30 p.m., I heard a soft scraping sound coming from the back door. At first, I thought it was just the wind or a tree branch brushing against the house. But then the sound changed. It was a distinct knock, 3 soft taps that sent my heart racing. I sat frozen, staring at the back door, too scared to move. When the knock came again, I forced myself to stand and tiptoed toward the door, pulling the curtain aside. A face stared back at me. A man, his eyes wide and unblinking, pressed his face against the glass. His breath fogged up the window as he whispered something, but I couldn't make it out. My heart pounded as I stumbled back, letting the curtain fall. The knocking came again, this time louder, more urgent. "Please, let me in," he said, his voice thin and pleading. I backed away, my mind racing. Who was he? Why was he here? My gut screamed not to open the door. I grabbed my phone from the living room, my hands shaking as I dialed my mum's number. Voicemail. I tried again, leaving a frantic message, but there was no answer. The knocking persisted, now coming from the front door. How had he moved so quickly? And why hadn't I heard him? Panic surged through me as I ran to the front window and peeked outside. No one was there, but the knocking continued, soft, insistent. "Let me in, please." The voice followed me, moving from door to door, window to window. It was as if he was circling the house, looking for a way inside. Then I heard it. The unmistakable creak of the back door opening. My blood ran cold. I had locked it. I was sure of it. But now the door was open, and I could hear the slow, deliberate footsteps coming inside. I bolted up the stairs, my heart hammering in my chest, and slammed my bedroom door shut, locking it behind me. I crawled under the bed, hoping to hide, but the footsteps followed me. Closer, louder, until they stopped just outside my bedroom door. The handle rattled. "Please, let me in," the voice whispered again, softer now, more insistent. I held my breath, covering my mouth to stifle the sobs that threatened to escape. The rattling stopped, and for a moment there was only silence. But then I heard the whisper again, this time from inside the room. "I know you're in there," it said, coming from the corner near the closet. Suddenly, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My parents were home. Relief washed over me as I heard their voices, and I bolted from under the bed, racing down the stairs to meet them. As I opened the door, the night air hit me, and I looked back toward the house. The figure was gone. There were no signs of the man who had been trying to get in, no footprints, no broken locks, nothing. When my parents stepped inside, I broke down, telling them everything. They searched the house, but there was no sign of an intruder. My mum reassured me, chalking it up to an overactive imagination and a creepy movie. But I knew what I had seen, what I had heard. Even now, I can't explain it. All I know is that something was out there that night, something that wanted to come inside, and it wasn't human. The Howl. It was supposed to be a quiet weekend. My parents were out of town for a couple of days, and I had the house to myself. I had plans, nothing major, just some video games, a pizza, and a couple of horror movies to pass the time. I was 18, more than old enough to stay home alone. At least that's what I told myself when they left that morning. By nightfall, things felt different. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes every small sound feel huge. Every creak of the floorboards a reason to turn on the nearest light. I had been through these feelings before, of course, and chalked it up to my mind playing tricks on me. I ordered my pizza, flipped on the TV, and told myself to relax. It was around 9 p.m. when the first howl echoed outside. At first, I thought it was just a dog. There were a few in the neighborhood, and it wasn't uncommon to hear barking at night. But this wasn't barking. It was deeper, throatier. A sound that cut through the walls of the house and made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I muted the TV, listening intently. For a few seconds, nothing. Then it came again, Longer this time, a guttural, almost human-like howl. I stood up, my heart pounding. I wasn't scared, not yet, but something about the sound bothered me. I headed to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to peer outside. The street was empty. No cars, no people. Just the flickering glow of the streetlight a few houses down. Shaking my head, I turned away from the window. Probably just a coyote, I muttered to myself, though I didn't entirely believe it. Coyotes didn't howl like that, did they? I tried to focus on the TV again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Every few minutes, I'd glance toward the windows, half expecting to see something moving outside. And then it happened. A loud thud against the back door, like something heavy had slammed into it. I jumped up, my heart racing now. The door rattled once, twice, and then fell silent. I grabbed my phone and dialed my friend Jake. He lived a few streets over and had been my go-to whenever I felt uneasy at home. He picked up after the second ring. "Hey man, what's up?" His voice was casual, unfazed by the fear that had gripped me. "Jake, are there any coyotes around here? Like, have you heard of anything weird going on?" "Coyotes? Not that I know of. Why?" "I'm hearing things, like howling, and something just slammed against my back door. It's probably nothing, but I just wanted to check." Jake laughed. "You sure you're not just watching too many horror movies? You sound freaked out." "I'm not freaking out. I stopped mid-sentence as I heard another noise from the back door. This time, it wasn't a thud, but the unmistakable sound of claws scratching against the wood. "Hold on," I whispered into the phone, creeping toward the back door. I held my breath, pressing my ear against it. The scratching was slow, deliberate, like whatever was on the other side knew I was there and was taunting me. "What's going on?" Jake asked, his voice suddenly serious. "Something's at the door," I whispered. My hand hovered over the lock, but I didn't dare open it. "Get out of there," Jake said. "Get in your car and drive over here." I took a step back from the door, my hand trembling as I gripped the phone tighter. I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and headed for the front of the house. But before I could reach the door, the howling came again. This time louder, closer. It was right outside. I stopped, frozen in place. My brain screamed at me to move, to get out, but my legs refused to listen. The howl turned into a growl, low and menacing, vibrating through the walls. I could hear it breathing now, heavy and deliberate. "Don't just stand there, man!" Jake was shouting into the phone, but his voice sounded distant, muffled compared to the growling outside. And then I saw it. Through the narrow gap in the curtains, just beyond the front window stood a figure. It was tall, hunched, and its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. It wasn't human. The thing's fur was matted, dark, and it had a snout, elongated, wolf-like. Its teeth, sharp and jagged, glistened under the faint streetlight. The creature stood on two legs, its massive claws digging into the earth as it sniffed the air, searching for me. I dropped the phone, panic finally setting in. I needed to get out, but how? The creature was between me and the front door, and the back door was now a dead end. I ran upstairs, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts as I locked myself in my bedroom. My mind raced for solutions, but all I could think about was how close it had been. How easily it could have broken through the window if it had wanted to. There was silence now, but I knew it wasn't over. The wolf-like figure was still out there, waiting. I grabbed the baseball bat from my closet, the only weapon I had, and stood by the window, peering out from behind the curtain. The street was still empty, But that didn't mean I was safe. Suddenly, a loud crash came from downstairs. My heart jumped into my throat. The creature was inside. I could hear it moving below, its heavy footsteps echoing through the house. I backed away from the door, gripping the bat so tightly my knuckles turned white. The creature sniffed, the sound of its claws clicking against the floor growing louder as it searched for me. I didn't know what to do. Should I hide? Run? I was trapped. The growling grew louder, closer as it started up the stairs. Each step it took felt like a countdown to my doom. I backed into the far corner of the room, bat raised, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The door creaked as the creature reached the top of the stairs. It paused outside, sniffing at the crack, as if savouring the fear seeping through the wood. Then, with a deafening crash, the door flew open, splinters flying as the creature barreled inside. It stood there, its glowing eyes locking onto mine, teeth bared in a twisted, predatory grin. This was it. I was going to die. With a roar, the creature lunged, its claws outstretched. I swung the bat, connecting with its arm, but it barely seemed to notice. It snarled, swiping at me with such force that I was knocked to the ground. I scrambled back, trying to find anything to defend myself with. The creature towered over me, its hot breath on my face as it leaned down, teeth gleaming. But before it could strike, something strange happened. It stopped, its body tensing as its head snapped toward the window. For a moment, it seemed distracted, its ears twitching as if it had heard something outside. Then, without warning, it turned and bolted out of the room, crashing through the window and disappearing into the night. I lay there, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Why had it left? What had it heard? I don't know how long I stayed there, but eventually, the police arrived. Jake had called them after I dropped the phone. They searched the house, but there was no sign of the creature, just the broken door and the shattered window. I tried to explain what I had seen, but they didn't believe me. They chalked it up to a home invasion, some kind of prank. But I knew the truth. That thing, whatever it was, is still out there. And it's hunting. The knock at midnight. Being home alone is something I never minded. I've always enjoyed solitude. It helps me unwind. So when my roommate, Linda, said she'd be out of town for the weekend, I didn't think twice about it. I was looking forward to a quiet weekend by myself, doing absolutely nothing. Our little 2-bedroom house was in a relatively safe neighborhood. Quiet, with neat rows of houses, tidy lawns, and families who kept to themselves. Nothing exciting ever really happened here, which was fine by me. I liked it that way. It was Friday night, and the house was silent except for the low hum of the TV in the background. I had a glass of wine in hand, curled up on the couch under a blanket, scrolling through my phone. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, casting shadows across the windows. The street was empty, as it usually was at this time of night. Everything was calm. Until the knock. It was soft at first, almost like someone was unsure if they should be knocking at all. I froze, thinking maybe it was the wind or a random sound from the TV. I set my glass down and muted the show, listening intently. Then the knock came again. This time, louder. My heart skipped a beat. Who would be knocking at my door at this hour? I glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. My stomach twisted with unease. "Who is it?" I called, my voice wavering slightly. No answer. Just silence. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to check through the peephole. I stood up slowly, my bare feet padding across the hardwood floor. I peered through the tiny opening, and my breath caught in my throat. 2 figures stood on my porch, dressed in black. Their faces were hidden by the shadows of their hoods. One of them was tall and lanky, while the other was shorter and stockier. They stood unnervingly still, facing the door. My blood ran cold. I stepped back from the door, my pulse quickening. My mind raced. Should I open it? Should I call the police? Who were these people? Another knock, this one harder, more insistent. The sound echoed through the house, making the walls feel as though they were closing in on me. I felt a lump form in my throat. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, and called out again. "What do you want?" No answer. I grabbed my phone from the couch and dialed Linda's number, my fingers shaking. It rang a few times before going to voicemail. I cursed under my breath. Just then, another sound came. This time, not from the front door. It came from the window behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest. The shorter figure was now standing at the window, peering in. I gasped, stumbling backward. The figure pressed its face closer to the glass, its breath fogging the pain. I could see the faint outline of its features now. Gaunt, hollow eyes, and a sickening grin that sent shivers down my spine. I bolted to the kitchen, locking the back door and checking the windows. My heart raced as I moved from room to room, ensuring everything was secure. My fingers fumbled as I tried to dial 911, panic making it hard to think straight. The operator picked up quickly, her voice calm and professional. 911, what's your emergency? There are 2 people outside my house, I blurted out, my voice shaky. They're knocking on my door and looking in my windows. Please, I'm scared. Are you alone in the house? She asked. Yes, I whispered. Stay on the line with me. We're sending officers to your location. I could feel tears welling up in my eyes as I crouched behind the kitchen counter, my phone gripped tightly in my hand. The operator kept talking, asking questions to keep me calm, but I could barely focus on her words. Suddenly, there was another knock, this time from the back door. I jumped, clutching the phone to my chest. They're at the back door now, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Stay where you are, the operator said. The police are on their way. I peeked around the corner and saw the tall figure at the back door, tapping on the glass. Slowly, methodically. It sent a wave of nausea through me. The shorter figure was still at the front window, peering in, watching. I couldn't breathe. I felt trapped. My mind raced through all the worst-case scenarios. Were they trying to break in? Were they armed? Minutes felt like hours as I sat there, huddled in the dark kitchen. The figures kept knocking, first at the front, then at the back, moving in an eerie synchronization. They never spoke, never called out, just the relentless tapping like a sick game. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw the flashing lights of a police car outside. Relief washed over me as I heard the sound of car doors slamming and voices outside. The police are here, I whispered into the phone, my voice trembling with relief. Stay on the line until they reach you, the operator said. I stood up slowly, moving toward the front door, and peeked out the window. The 2 figures were gone, just like that, vanished. There was no sign of them anywhere. I unlocked the door as 2 officers approached, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Are you okay, Mom? One of them asked, his voice calm but concerned. I nodded, still shaking. They were here, 2 people. They were knocking on the doors and windows. They were watching me. The officers did a quick sweep of the property, checking every corner, but they didn't find anything. No footprints, no sign that anyone had been there at all. It's possible they ran off when they saw us, the other officer said. Do you want us to stay for a while? I shook my head. No, I'll be fine. They stayed for a few more minutes, reassuring me that they'd patrol the neighborhood and keep an eye out. But when they left, I felt more alone than ever. I locked every door and window again, double-checking everything before returning to the couch. My heart was still pounding, my nerves frayed. I wanted to believe it was over, that they were gone. But something deep inside me couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't the last I'd see of them. For hours, I sat there, wide-eyed, staring at the door and the windows, waiting for another knock. The shadows outside seemed to move with every gust of wind, and every creak of the house made my pulse race. Sleep never came that night, and for days afterward, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the two figures would return. But they never did. At least, not yet. You've braved the darkness with us. Subscribe and keep the spirits at bay. Until next time, sleep if you dare.